Hollywood is filled with monuments to success, towering studios, legendary theaters, and sprawling mansions built by the people who shaped the entertainment industry. But hidden behind gates in Beverly Hills sits one estate that tells a darker story. A story of family betrayal, power struggles, bitter feuds, lost fortunes, and a man who became one of the most feared executives in Hollywood history. This is the story of the Jack Warner estate, the mansion built by the last surviving Warner brother, a home that symbolized the rise of one of America's greatest entertainment empires and the personal cost of achieving that success. Because behind the luxury, the swimming pools, the movie stars, and the millions of dollars was a family that would ultimately tear itself apart. This is the dark story of the Warner Brothers Empire Mansion and the man who ruled it. Long before the mansion existed, the Warner family were struggling immigrants. The four Warner brothers, Harry, Albert, Sam, and Jack, were born into poverty. Their parents had fled anti-Jewish persecution in Eastern Europe and arrived in America searching for a better future. Like millions of immigrant families at the beginning of the 20th century, life was hard. The brothers worked odd jobs, sold goods, performed whatever labor they could find. But one invention changed everything: motion pictures. The brothers became fascinated by the new technology. They saw something most people didn't. Movies weren't just entertainment, they were the future. By 1923, they officially founded Warner Brothers. At first, it was a small operation, nothing compared to the giants of Hollywood, but the brothers were relentless. Every dollar earned was reinvested. Every success led to a bigger gamble. And slowly their empire began to grow. The Warner Brothers built their company together, but eventually one brother would want it all for himself. And that brother was Jack. Jack Warner was different from his brothers. Where Harry was cautious, where Sam was innovative, where Albert preferred business, Jack craved attention. He loved power. He loved influence, and he loved being around celebrities. He quickly became the public face of Warner Brothers. Actors feared him, directors respected him, employees learned not to challenge him. He could make careers, and he could destroy them. Hollywood in the 1930s and 1940s operated almost like a kingdom. Studio bosses ruled absolutely, and Jack Warner became one of the most powerful kings in town. Stars signed long-term contracts. Their careers belonged to the studio. If Jack liked you, you became famous. If he didn't, your future could disappear overnight. This growing power transformed him. The struggling immigrant son was becoming Hollywood royalty, and he wanted a palace worthy of his position. By the 1940s, Warner Brothers had become one of America's most successful studios. The company produced legendary films, gangster movies, westerns, musicals, war dramas, and eventually classics like Casablanca. Money poured in. The brothers became wealthy beyond anything they could have imagined as children. Yet success brought tension. The studio that had once united the family was now dividing it. Arguments erupted over money, over control, over direction. Jack increasingly viewed Warner Brothers as his company, not the family company. His brothers saw something dangerous happening. Jack wasn't satisfied sharing power. He wanted complete control, and eventually he found a way to get it. Many historians consider it one of the greatest betrayals in entertainment history. By the 1950s, the brothers were aging. Television was threatening Hollywood's business model. The family decided to sell their shares. What happened next stunned everyone. Jack secretly organized a deal allowing him to regain control after the sale. His brothers believed they were all leaving together. Instead, Jack emerged as the dominant owner. Harry Warner was devastated. He reportedly viewed the move as an unforgivable betrayal. The relationship between the brothers collapsed. For decades, they had built an empire together. Now it was broken. Some accounts claim Harry never truly forgave Jack. The damage was permanent, and while the company survived, the family never recovered. The mansion Jack would later build stood as a symbol of that victory, but also as a monument to what had been lost. As Jack Warner's wealth exploded, he began creating one of the most extravagant estates in California. Located in Beverly Hills, the property was enormous. Perfectly manicured gardens stretched across the grounds. Luxury filled every room. Movie stars attended parties there. Politicians visited. Business leaders sought invitations. The estate reflected the image Jack wanted the world to see. Power, success, importance. Everything was bigger than necessary, more impressive than necessary. It wasn't merely a home, it was a statement, a declaration that the poor immigrant boy had conquered Hollywood. But behind the gates, life was far from perfect. To outsiders, the mansion appeared magical. Guests saw glamour, champagne, movie stars, endless luxury. But many people who worked around Jack described a different reality. He could be ruthless, demanding, explosive. Employees often walked on eggshells. Hollywood executives feared his temper. Actors worried about his judgment. The mansion became both a retreat and a fortress. Jack controlled who entered, who left, and who mattered. For a man who had achieved everything, trust became increasingly difficult. The higher he climbed, the fewer genuine relationships remained. The mansion grew larger, but the circle around him grew smaller. The fortune that paid for the estate came from an era of Hollywood that many now view differently. The studio system generated incredible wealth, but it also exercised extraordinary control over people's lives. Actors often worked under restrictive contracts. Personal relationships were monitored. Public images were carefully managed. Scandals were hidden. Reputations were manufactured, and studio executives held immense influence. Jack Warner was one of the strongest defenders of this system. For decades, it made him rich, yet critics argued it came at a human cost. The mansion stood as a reminder of who benefited most from that arrangement: the kings of Hollywood. Throughout the years, countless celebrities passed through Warner's world. Some adored him, others despised him. Stories circulated endlessly through Hollywood: arguments, affairs, career-ending disputes, power struggles. Some stories became legend, others remain impossible to fully verify. But one thing was certain: Jack Warner was rarely far from controversy. He operated in an industry built on illusion, and illusion often requires secrecy. The mansion hosted glamorous evenings, but beyond the laughter and music were negotiations worth millions, careers hanging in the balance, and rivalries that could last decades. By the late 1940s, fear had swept across America. The Second World War had ended. A new conflict was beginning: the Cold War. Communism became the great enemy of the United States, and nowhere was suspicion more intense than in Hollywood. Politicians, investigators, and government committees began searching for communist influence inside the film industry. Writers, actors, directors, producers. Anyone could suddenly find themselves under suspicion. Careers that had taken decades to build could disappear in a matter of days. And Jack Warner found himself standing at the center of the storm. For many people in Hollywood, this period became one of the darkest chapters in the industry's history. The House Un-American Activities Committee, better known as HUAC, launched investigations into alleged communist activity in the entertainment business. Witnesses were called to testify. Some cooperated, others refused. The consequences could be devastating. A person's name appearing in the wrong newspaper headline could destroy their future. Many of Hollywood's biggest studios quietly supported blacklists. Individuals accused of communist sympathies found themselves unable to get work. Writers suddenly had no scripts to write. Actors lost contracts. Directors saw projects vanish overnight. Fear became a business strategy. Jack Warner's role during this period remains controversial to this day. Supporters argued that he was protecting his company during a difficult political climate. Critics claimed that studio executives, including Warner, helped create an atmosphere where careers were sacrificed to protect profits. Regardless of which side someone takes, there is little doubt that the period left deep scars throughout Hollywood. Inside the Jack Warner estate, guests continued attending lavish parties. Movie stars still gathered around swimming pools. Champagne continued to flow. But outside those gates, an entirely different reality existed. People feared losing everything. Friendships were tested. Colleagues turned against one another. Some individuals testified before government committees to save themselves. Others refused and paid the price. The contrast was striking. At the top of Hollywood, powerful executives lived in extraordinary luxury. Meanwhile, many of the creative people responsible for making movies faced uncertainty and fear. The blacklist would ultimately affect hundreds of careers. Some artists worked under fake names. Others left Hollywood entirely. A number never recovered professionally. Years later, many historians would look back on the era as a cautionary tale about power and fear. The studios survived. The executives remained wealthy, but countless individuals paid a heavy personal price. For Jack Warner, the period reinforced his reputation as one of Hollywood's toughest businessmen. He believed in protecting the company, protecting the studio, protecting the empire, but that approach also earned him critics who viewed him as cold and ruthless. The events of the blacklist years helped shape how many people remembered him, not merely as a studio executive, not merely as a businessman, but as one of the powerful men who controlled Hollywood during one of its most controversial periods. Even today, debates continue over the actions taken during those years. Some see them as necessary decisions made during a time of national anxiety. Others view them as betrayals of artistic freedom and personal liberty. What cannot be denied is that the era left a permanent mark on Hollywood. And during those turbulent years, the Jack Warner estate stood as one of the most visible symbols of the power structure that ruled the entertainment industry. For some, it represented success. For others, it represented everything that was wrong with old Hollywood. And that tension would follow Jack Warner for the rest of his life. By the 1960s, Hollywood was changing rapidly. The old studio bosses were losing influence. A new generation of filmmakers emerged. Audiences wanted different stories. The world that Jack Warner had dominated was disappearing. His management style increasingly looked outdated. The industry was moving forward, whether he liked it or not. The mansion remained magnificent, but it represented a fading era, a relic of old Hollywood power. And Jack struggled to accept that reality. Eventually, even Jack Warner realized the future belonged to someone else. In 1967, he sold control of Warner Brothers in a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars in modern terms. The empire built by four brothers had effectively passed into new hands. For Jack, it was the end of an era. The company remained, the studio remained, but the Warner family's direct control was largely over. The mansion still stood, yet its owner was no longer the king of Hollywood. The kingdom had moved on. As Jack aged, the world around him transformed. New executives arrived, new stars emerged, new technologies changed entertainment forever. The estate remained one of the most valuable properties in Beverly Hills. But even vast wealth could not stop time. Friends disappeared. Family relationships remained strained. The brothers who had built Warner Brothers together were gone. The empire survived, yet the family dream that created it had long since fractured. For many observers, this was the tragedy at the center of Jack Warner's story. He achieved almost everything he wanted, but the price was enormous. Following Jack Warner's death in 1978, the estate entered a new chapter. The property became one of the most famous homes in America. Ownership changed. Values soared. The mansion became a symbol of Beverly Hills luxury. Decades later, it would command staggering prices, hundreds of millions of dollars. Among the most expensive residential properties ever sold. Yet most buyers weren't purchasing just a house. They were purchasing history, a connection to the golden age of Hollywood, and to one of its most controversial figures. Today, the Jack Warner estate remains an icon. A reminder of how Hollywood was built, a reminder of immigrant ambition, of extraordinary success, of family conflict, and of the dangers of unchecked power. The mansion represents both the best and worst aspects of the American dream. A family arrived with nothing, built a global empire, changed entertainment forever, then watched their relationships collapse under the weight of success. Few homes tell such a complicated story, and fewer still remain standing as evidence of it. The Jack Warner estate is more than a mansion. It is a monument to ambition, to wealth, to power, and to betrayal. Behind its gates lies the story of four brothers who changed Hollywood forever. A story that began with poverty, reached unimaginable heights, and ended with broken relationships and a divided family. The Warner Brothers empire survived. The movies survived. The legacy survived. But the family that built it never truly did. And perhaps that is the darkest chapter of all. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to Old Money Media for more deep dives into the rise and fall of America's greatest industrial dynasties, business empires, and forgotten legends. Thanks for watching.